Hi, I'm John Sarakis with the Digital Mastermind. You're listening to The Climb. This is where agency owners and leaders tune in to get growth tips and strategies for growing their businesses. All right, this is John Sarakis with the Digital Mastermind, and you're listening to The Climb, where agency owners and leaders tune in to get growth tips and strategies for growing their businesses. This episode, we're going to discuss the ethics of running a business in today's environment. We've got a Certified B Corp CEO, Cameron Madill of PixelSpoke, who's going to give us insight into what it means, how it's done, and all the inside info on how it's transformed his business. Cam is the founder and CEO of PixelSpoke, and he's based in Portland, Oregon, and a member of the Digital Mastermind Group. But before we get into that, as always, I have my partner in crime, David McGraw. Dave, you run a business. Are you a B Corp? Or how do you feel about corporate responsibility? Could you do it?
I mean, I think it's something that's got to be important. But I got to tell you, I am come from the side that I'm a little bit less inclined to sign up for a rule sheet.
I wouldn't necessarily rule sheet. I think it's more about following I guess centering everybody's values.
Exactly.
You could construe it as a rule sheet or guidelines, right? I mean, they're guidelines.
Sure.
But if you have a bunch of people that are ethically bound to something outside of being like an attorney, accountant, or a doctor or something, right? But they all are for this cause. Could you see that as a guiding principle forming in your business?
I love the idea, and I think it could be a part of your culture. I think that's got to be reinforced in your culture. I just don't know if I would be ready to make a rule that we can't break, because I think each project has its own nuance. I think each aspect in business needs to have room to have nuance. And if you stick, if you concrete yourself into a way, yes, it can be your guiding light, but also prevents you from being the agile company that we were to get here.
Right. So you're saying it could be rigid.
It could be too
rigidity.
Rigid. Yeah.
All right. And I think that's a possibility, but I think it's more about taking care of the environment. And granted, I don't know. That's why we're going to have Cameron on here to talk about that. And but yeah, I think it's more about something that's outside of your business practice.
So as an agency, what about if you're representing, a coal-fired power plant and you have to do their marketing? Something interesting that I'd love to hear Cameron's perspective is, do you take that as a client or do you reject it because it's not falling within, your framework?
Oh, I think so. I think, yeah, you probably have, your framework, and that could probably hurt at times. Yeah, you would turn things away. I thought you were going to ask if you were a coal-fired plant, could you be a B Corp?
that too. I bet you they can.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's like, 10 years ago, everybody was trying to become organic, sell all their products organic. Now, I feel like everything is organic now. And it can't be that the vast majority of our farmland is now completely free of chemicals. I feel like the laws or the regulations to be certified organic is just so laxed now. And
I don't think it's lax. I think everybody's figured out the system and how to get it right. It's a pay for play. It's like a beauty contest to some extent.
I bet you
can do it. You're going to win.
I bet you there's a coal-fired power plant out there that's considered a green energy source or a green business.
No way.
It has to be. I bet you.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I don't know. That's why we're gonna have Cameron on. He's gonna educate us. But I mean, just ethics in general, right? This is something that I don't want to say youngsters, but I think a lot of people that are of a younger generation, the more millennials and Generation Z are coming up, and this is something that's near and dear to them. It's very important, and they're aligning themselves with companies that they believe in.
Yeah, I was searching, I strongly believe a series of, guiding principles on how you do business. Like my interactions with clients, my interactions with employees, I definitely believe in that lane. I'm just not so sure I would not take on business that, you know, was against my politics or against my beliefs, or, you know, if I was for the planet and, you know, a power plant, I would probably take that business.
Yeah. And I mean, you know what, though? I think that, and to me, that would be kind of marketing hooey, right? Because it's pretty easy not to work with the power plant, or not to work with, if you're against guns or any of those tobacco. To me, that's like, okay, well, what are the chances of you actually getting that account? Are they really that high? There's only so many, power plants. It's a monopoly to some respects. Same with guns and tobacco. There's only a handful of them. But I want to dig in and see, like, all right, what is the real reason for it? And the other side to what you were saying, when it comes to principles, I think there are guiding principles, right, that you have in your business. You also have your core values, it's kind of like your formula and your DNA for doing things. That book that Ray Dalio wrote, Principles, is all about that. He's created this meritocracy, this company on how to, or this company that is built literally just off of him writing down these itty bitty principles and working on it through a collaborative effort with his team over, 20 or 30 years. And he's one of the most successful hedge funds in the country.
Yeah, I think that's probably a smart approach. Like, if with everything, I mean, we've talked about this when it comes to the Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS.
Yeah,
I'm just not a whole adopter of anything. I don't want to subscribe to something that tells me everything I need to do and how I need to do it. I want to borrow. And I think I use the term borrow because I might give it back. Things change. I don't want to get into a rigid platform that dictates to me what I need to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Just you can borrow, you can steal, you can just build your own. I'm a firm believer of that as well. Yeah. Because I mean, when you get into like a rigid system, and this, I guess, goes into my personality, I'm just like, well, we're not doing it right. I mean, this is how we're supposed to do it. And I think that creates constructs that are limiting and can hold you back.
Or what about if there's the scenario that you have a conflict? Like, you could take this client on and go against your values, or because you're not getting that client, you have to let go of an employee you've had for 5 years.
Like, this is like some hypothetical ethical problem, like on an LSAT or something.
Yeah, which value gets thrown aside? Loyalty or, compassion?
It's like you're holding your wife in one arm and you're holding your child in the other. You can only have the strength to pick up one. Which do you pick up?
Yeah.
Do you throw yourself off the cliff? Do the ultimate sacrifice? Yeah.
We all go.
All right. And on that note, let's get ready to introduce Cameron. He's going to be joining us here in just a minute. Cameron, into this discussion. Cam, are you there, buddy?
I'm here.
All right. So before we get into anything, I want to go over your business profile and correct me if any of this stuff is wrong.
Sure.
First off, this is, of course, Cameron Madill, CEO of Pixel Spoke. You started your business in 2003, so almost 17 years in business.
Yep.
You have how many employees? 12 based on your website?
Yep. 13 including me. Yep.
Oh, 13, right on. You solely focus on credit unions?
That's all of our marketing efforts. We do have a lot of clients in other industries, but probably 2/3 of our book is credit unions at this point. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Right on. And you offer web design and a full suite of marketing services.
Correct.
And you're a Stanford guy that speaks 3 languages.
I would say I speak 2 languages. I used to be fluent in Spanish, and then I speak a smattering of a whole bunch of other ones like French and Russian and other
All right,
things.
we're firing our researcher. Okay. All right.
That's probably what it says on my LinkedIn profile.
That's exactly what it says on your LinkedIn profile.
No one ever reaches out to me in French, so how will they ever know?
All right, perfect. All right, so how did you get into this business? You started out as a family business, correct?
Yeah, I mean, so I basically I took 2 years off from college in the middle of college. And so that gave me the opportunity when I came back for my junior year, all my friends had graduated and I got to see them go to jobs. And one of the things I saw was that they all just kind of sucked. Can I say suck on this podcast? I don't know. Anyway.
Dude, you can say whatever you want on this podcast.
All right. I don't know if there's like censorship rules.
No.
So whether it was nonprofits or PhDs or software companies or finance, big business, small business, like everyone just complained about their job. And so it got me thinking like maybe rather than trying to figure out like who I want to work for, I want to figure out how to get people to work for me. So I kind of went down this path of like, there's no entrepreneurs really in my family. And so I just didn't really know anything about like this whole world of starting and, or, owning a business. And simultaneously my dad he was a pretty successful, very successful software executive. And he went from kind of his dream job to his company getting bought, the company that he worked for, but he was like I think he ran the Portland office of maybe a couple 1,000 person company. And so it was like his dream job. And then IBM buys that company. And he just hated it. Like they made him go out to the suburbs. Their kind of whole philosophy was the managers lead by example. So all of a sudden he's in his 50s working 70-hour weeks. The guy who did the turnaround at IBM wrote a book called How to Make an Elephant Dance, which is an interesting book, but you can imagine like, do I want to work for that company? So I think he basically said no. So anyway, long story short, then my dad and I ended up just kind of chit-chatting, and we decided to start this thing together. And then my sister actually worked for us for 8 years as well. So yeah, it was a family business, but not the kind of thing where I kind of wish my dad had this amazing business and just gave it to me, but instead we just kind of built this really confused company together. But we muddled through and made it work.
Wow. Dave, could you work with your wife or dad or sister?
I see it happen a lot. I don't know if I could do it. Honestly, don't know. Especially not my dad. Absolutely not my dad. My wife, maybe.
All right. Yeah. I worked for my dad. So and granted, it wasn't like a partnership like you had, Cameron. And my dad fired me in front of like a group of other people. So
I hear that a lot. Like people back when we worked together, my dad retired a few years. So he was my partner until 2009, and then I bought him out, and then he worked with us till 2017. But like people would generally come up and they'd always be like, man, I could not work with my dad, but he's just an amazing guy. We had a great time. We were not an amazingly effective partnership, but I wouldn't trade the experience for anything in the world. I think it made us a lot closer together.
Right on. That's awesome. And speaking of family, your wife is also an agency owner, isn't she?
Yeah, that's right. Man, your internet research game is strong. Yeah, so Anna runs like an SEO, paid social, paid search company here in Portland as well. A little bit younger company, about 3 years old. She's got a team of 4. They do great work.
Okay. So what's it like to go home and have a conversation with somebody that completely gets what you're going through at work?
It's a good question. It was totally unexpected. So I actually always said I never wanted to work with someone in business. I always figured I'd, marry like an academic or a lawyer or a doctor. That's kind of most of what my family is. But, it was funny. I think we've had a little bit of learnings. How, there's times where it's like, dude, I do not want to talk about work right now. Like, I know you understand what it feels like to lose that deal or to have an employee, situation that you don't know how to handle or feels personal or whatever. And there's times where it's awesome. And I think we can really help each other out and kind of mentor, coach, each other and give perspective that probably most people couldn't. And then there's also, we had just had a little bit of learning of times where it's like, you know what, I'm sure you have a lot to offer on this. I just want to turn off. I'll deal with work tomorrow morning.
Yeah, no, I think it's a healthy way of going about it. But I noticed she's also a B Corp, right?
She is. So yeah, so we're both.
Who had it first?
I had it first. Yeah, we're both proudly. Well, I had it before her company even existed. So we're both proudly certified B Corps. We certified in 2014, and we met, I guess, a little over 3 years ago. And I encouraged her to. She had a really amazing concept, which was every quarter they would pick a different nonprofit and they would do a pro bono project for them. And it really just kind of, you could see it really lit her employees up in a good way. And every quarter you kind of learn about a new cause and a new organization. And you feel really good about it. So I thought that was a great model. And I just told her, I said, hey, I think this B Corp stuff would be right. Both you'd really like the community, but also it would give you kind of a roadmap to even greater social and environmental impact.
So along those lines, I mean, tell us a little about, what it means to become a B Corp. So as becoming a B Corp, what has it done for your culture, your company, your clients?
Yeah. So it's been transformational. It's the kind of the quick primer. And there's actually a great group called Florida for Good out in your neck of the woods. So they're certified B corporations are companies that do this really rigorous assessment, maybe the most rigorous assessment that exists on what's your impact in the world, in your community, for your workforce, for the environment. And what's really cool about it is if you cross a certain threshold, it's really rigorous. Only like 10% of the companies get there. But if you cross a certain threshold, then you get to say, hey, I'm a certified B Corp. You get to use this logo. And kind of like fair trade or, LEED for buildings, it becomes this kind of like stamp, this imprint of credibility that you're walking the walk. You're not just talking the talk. If you've ever heard the term greenwashing, probably this is kind of meant to be a way to, greenwashing, or actually gets used a lot of people who just kind of say that they're doing good things for the world. But meanwhile, they're like, hey, we've got this program to, put flowers in the local kid's school. Meanwhile, our business model is like dumping toxic waste, in the playground or whatever. And so that's sort of, greenwashing.
Yeah.
So this is like a way to really say that, hey, we are walking the walk. We really are. We're not just talking about doing good work and trying to get marketing credit for it. We've like really put our money where our mouth is and invested a lot of, I guess, money and time into thinking about how we can be a positive contributor to our community and our world.
Do you think Dave is a greenwasher?
I don't know enough about Dave to say. I mean, I think it'd be easy if we just had like a little caption underneath his video right here. I could see it happening. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the greenwashing is people who really try to claim this mantle of being on the side of the angels. I just think of a greenwasher as a hypocrite, right? And I don't think Dave's a hypocrite from what I've seen.
Okay.
They're the people who you just meet and they're just gushing. I think it's the stuff that people go crazy over, right? Whether it's the politician who, decries the state of clean coal.
Yeah. I mean, coming up with terms that sound so green.
Yep.
And really it's just that lipstick on a pig just so they can get, that stamp or, that pseudo stamp.
Amen to that.
So you mentioned the rigor. So like, what does it entail? Becoming a C Corp.
B Corp, yeah. So
B Corp. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I got a C Corp. Not.
No, when actually, real quick point, just because this is a point of confusion. There's this certification, which is the B Corp, like the letter B certification, and then there are actually different legal structures. And the whole idea is that the legal structure, that the legal structures we have for corporations in the U.S. and around the world actually really encourage kind of like psychopathic behavior on the parts of companies. Where profits are put above any other consideration.
Right.
So it's confusing. So there are in Oregon, they're called benefit companies. I don't know what they're called in Florida, but there's also, like a C Corp or an S Corp is a legal form. There actually in many states are things called B Corps, and they're sort of a legal status. And the idea is that if we both have this certification, which is this really rigorous analysis, and we change our legal form, our structure of incorporation, that those two kind of create a healthier, more sustainable business for the world. To your question about rigor, I guess the real short version is the survey is awful. I sort of think of it as like doing your taxes. Like taxes always make me feel dumb. Like all these questions of like, did you do this and that? And I'm just like, I don't know the answer to this stuff. Like, how do I figure this out? So it's like it took me, probably 2+ hours to get through the assessment. About 200 questions on average. The questions adapt a little bit based on your business model, and then they audit you. So we had to pull documents for, I don't know, probably 40 of the questions. So wow. One of them might be like, what's the ratio of pay between your highest paid person and lowest paid person? And they don't audit you on every question, but they just randomly pick a whole bunch of them. And then they say, okay, so now we actually need to see names and salaries for every employee at your company. That would be one example. Or another one would be, what percentage of your time did you spend in volunteer work? And if you get audited, it's like, okay, now show us a list of every volunteer activity and every person and how many hours. So it's, I will say it's not, I don't think the assessment itself is very fun, but to me, it's the inspiring part of this is, I just think there's so many people who kind of talk and don't act. And definitely if you are a B Corp, you have crossed a threshold that is not easy. So I really have a lot of respect for anyone who takes the time and effort to do that.
No, I think that's fantastic. And to what extent do you think could somebody BS this? Is it possible to BS it?
It's a great question. It comes up a fair bit. I think you can BS anything, but I think this one is really hard. Okay. I think of all the groups I've been in, you told me we can We can be candid
whatever
here.
you want.
So I've been in a lot of different business groups over the years, and I think we've all been in groups where you meet someone and you're kind of like, this guy, could be a gal, but usually it's a guy, is full of like crap. They talk a good game.
You say that.
I feel like it's usually a dude. I mean, sometimes it's a lady, but men are full of it. And there's just, in every group, there's like, how many people in there are just kind of full of it versus how many are really kind of authentic, and showing up as who they are. There's just almost no one in the B Corp community that I really doubt their credibility.
Right.
The thing I've seen is I've definitely seen companies here in Portland. Portland's a very progressive market. So in some markets, something like this might not weigh as much, but in a place like Portland, people really want to have something like B Corp status. And I've seen some colleagues who I'd say are highly PR driven. And that, they'll kind of be like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about B Corp. And I'll talk to them about it. And they'll be like, yeah, that sounds great. Our employees are interested. And I think it might help us with sales. And they never become B Corps. Because I think if you're just trying to do it for PR, you open that assessment up and you're just like, whoa, this is really, really hard.
Not worth it, man.
Not worth it. And then you either got to figure out, am I going to lie on all of these questions and then hope that they don't audit me? Because they don't demand documentation for everything, but it's like a quarter. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you start sending back, fictitious documents or whatever. I mean, so no, I think it's just, nothing is perfect, but it's pretty darn hard. And it's not something you're just going to do with like a rush of blood to the head. It takes too much work.
Yeah. So who's pedaling the bike to drop off the compost at Pixel Spoke? From what I remember, Portland's pretty hilly.
Man, fantastic research. Your internet research game is strong. Fitzhugh Ryland, or Fitz, who's our technology director. He has I forget what they are, but it's one of those big plastic buckets. Man, that thing smells like, oh. But God bless him. He's been doing it for probably 4 or 5 years. And this is a guy who, he's our technology director. He also lives in a tiny home. So I think his commitment to the environment should not be questioned.
Yeah. And then do all of those types of things like peddling compost and of course recycling, is that all part of being a B Corp or?
Yeah, I mean, the assessment only goes so deep, right? So it's not like they literally have a question of like, do you have an employee volunteer who bicycles your compost,
in a tiny home?
In a tiny home, right? It's not that specific. But I think there might have been something around, what is do you have a policy for managing food waste? And they do ask things about, do you encourage, I know you guys love this in Florida, right? With your bicycle friendly urban design. It's a lot easier in a place like Portland, right? The city has invested a lot of money and it's a pretty compact city, but nonetheless, they say like, what do you do? So we have things like, we have a bike maintenance subsidy every year. So like you have programs to support people biking or taking public transit or walking or whatever.
Okay. And for, the sake of Florida, I think it's subjective that it's easier in Portland because it's flat here. Okay.
Oh God. And it's so much warmer. I know. And I love Florida. Please, anyone listening. I wish I was in Florida right now. It's just different. But yeah, if you're in, I just remember I visited Miami a handful of times because I used to live in Cuba for a while. And so then if you live in Cuba, you end up with a lot of friends in Miami as they all leave eventually. And I'd go visit folks and it was just like, there weren't even like sidewalks in some of the places I would go. So it's just like you had to drive everywhere.
Oh, really? No, so it wasn't very bike friendly.
No, it wasn't even walking friendly.
I haven't been to Cuba. I got to get there. Huh.
That was Miami. Cuba, I would say, was much more bike friendly, but.
Oh, you were talking about Miami there. Sorry about that. My mistake.
My mistake.
You said you lived in Cuba though, right?
It was a poor transition. I segued from Cuba to Miami.
Okay. You got the Cuban slip in there. That's good though. Before I jump on that, David, when was the last time that you rode a bicycle for environmental purposes?
Very, very long time. In Florida, it's too hot to ride a bike to get to work. I'm talking about 8 o'clock in the morning. There's no way I can ride a bike to get to work. And I only have like about a 7-minute commute. But weekend ride, I'm always on a bike. We're at the beach. We got the beach. Now the beaches areas are very biker friendly. It's inland Florida. Like when you cross the intercoastal, it's just suburbia. Yeah. And it's just too spread out to get anywhere with a bike. It's all joy riding.
Cameron, do they have a B- Corp?
No, but I think maybe we can start one on this podcast. Do you want to improve the world, but you're not that ambitious? Come talk to us.
All right, man. What compelled you to start focusing on credit unions? Was it organic?
Yeah, it was accidental. So I can't remember if I've talked to either of you guys about this, but obviously
Our audience doesn't know it.
Right, exactly. And you guys would have forgotten. So, well, you were probably drunk, is all I'm saying.
Well, it's a possibility.
It's a possibility.
Champagne, yeah.
Probably.
So it was kind of. I was on the board of our credit union who we banked with here at Pixel Spoke, and then I was on the board for a couple of years, and then I left. And maybe a year after I had left, they approached me and said, "Hey, we're rebranding. Would you consider doing our website?" And I was, we're all agency people on this call, right? I was like, I mean, sure, we'll always take work, right? Like work's hard to find. But I'd never thought about working for credit unions, and I didn't really know anything. I'd learned a lot about our credit union, which had the phenomenally uninspiring name of Northwest Resource Federal Credit Union. Who doesn't want to bank there, right? Like really tugs at the heartstrings. But they actually did a phenomenal job on the rebrand. So they rebranded as Trailhead Credit Union, and they kind of became like Portland's hipster credit union. Like this is hipster land, right? Like we were one of the forerunners of that trend, which is, probably made everyone who's listening, it's probably made your city kind of obnoxious. But, it was big here long before most places. And so they really kind of captured this feel of this demographic. So we started getting calls from credit unions all over the country, and I didn't think very much about it. And I screwed up every sales opportunity. Like I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to talk to them. It was just so different. We were mostly doing B2B. But simultaneously, definitely no pride here. Our previous strategy, which I felt really good about, loved it. We got lots of good kind of press around it, was just totally failing. Like it what can I say? I loved it, but it was one of those moments where life, like you look in the mirror and it's like, this is not working, like full stop. There was just no way to rationalize that our strategy for business development was working. So kind of these two things were happening at the same time as we were getting these calls. And then I was like, we've got this like pretty co-op-y culture. Like people here are actually excited about cooperatives and social impact and all of that. And so I just thought, what the heck, let's try just focusing on this group. So I think it was 2015, we made the decision to say, let's do all of our marketing towards credit unions. We'll still work with other folks, but kind of that idea of like, know your bullseye. And then if you miss, you can still work with them. But it was pretty scary because it was like 5% of our revenue. And we just said all of our outbound communication will be around credit unions. But it's paid off. I mean, we probably more than doubled in size since then. And it's the majority of our business. And we managed to grow that business while kind of keeping the rest of the business, stable or only slightly declining.
So it sounds like this is a monumental branding play, right?
Yeah, it's a focus play. I'm a big believer in that. It was actually a guy I met through the digital Mastermind group, right? Which we're all in of Jeff. God, I'm forgetting his last name, but his character. What's his name? Jeff. Anyway,
there's a few Jeffs.
Well, anyway, he was like the OG. I think he was one of the founders.
Jeff Klein.
Yeah, Jeff Klein. And,
Yeah.
He was, a little bit, probably maybe a couple decades older than me. And I remember him just saying at one point, he's like, I'll never do a business that's not vertically focused. And I'd always sort of hated the idea of doing a vertically focused business, but I do think, I've done a bunch of reading on strategy over the course of my career, and it's hard to know. It's like, there's so many books and theories, but one thing I've come away from that just believing is that like strategy equals focus. And if you can't state your strategy in one sentence, then, you really don't have a strategy. And so the great thing for us is like, all I want to occupy in your brain is 4 words: credit union web design. And there's a bunch of other stuff we can talk to you about, strategies and, blah, blah, blah. But it's like people, and I've had all sorts of random people who have nothing to do with the credit union space send us leads because it's so simple that they can just remember, oh yeah, Cameron, credit union web design. And before it was just like, oh man, trying to explain what we did. It's like, oh, well, it's web design, but it's really digital marketing. And it's really more like of a strategic partnership. And it's really focused on like, creating these digital connect, just like blah, 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 the way most people sound with their elevator pitches.
Right.
So I think that just kind of made an impression on me of just like, can you just make it so simple? Then you'll probably have a better chance of growing.
Right on. Yeah, you took out all the, we're special, words, we're different, words, use us, words. All right. I love that, man.
What's your elevator pitch, John? Or Dave? I don't know. I'd love to hear.
Dave, yeah, what's your elevator pitch? What do you got over there?
I've got that generic "we'll do it all" pitch, but I will say that we do have our silos of expertise, and I tend to speak to that. And when you can speak to somebody about your expertise in their industry and their field, I mean, it's very similar to what Cameron's saying, is that you get their attention, they're excited, they're interested. So for me personally, like education software, I have a long history in education software. So when I have a client that I'm talking to that's, remotely around that, they're really interested in it. So.
And it's like, if they can remember that really simple thing, then you can start the conversation and then you can get into all the details, right? But that's actually good, because now I'm like, I can actually remember, like, Dave McGraw, education software. If I come across some random project, which we all do, as you know, like the random person is only going to care enough to remember like 4 or 5 words.
Oh yeah, that's just branding, right? It's that one simple, thought in somebody's mind. I used to have this long, I wouldn't say long, it was like a 3-minute pitch when, I had a separate agency, Revital, that was, it tugged at the heartstrings. It was why I started it. And, now through a merger, we're still working on that, Cam. Okay, bro? All right.
Well, I'm on the podcast to make you feel bad about yourself. So,
but my parents would be proud.
Tough love.
Absolutely. All right. So you reduced your work week down to 4 days per week. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Yeah.
All right. So how did you find a way to get your work done quicker, or are you working the same amount of hours but less?
How do you know all this stuff? Are you inside my mind? Did you talk to my wife?
Anna's very giving with information. Is all.
Wow, I am impressed, man. I mean, I'm dark. I'm not even on social media anymore.
Which is another question in here, by the way. Yeah.
All right.
We'll get to that.
All right. So, 4 days a week. It's funny. I've been wanting to do this I've been doing this for, as you said, almost 17 years, and it's not like one job. It's evolved, mutated. I don't know what the right term is. It's changed so much over the years. It's definitely kept me interested. But I think maybe I was feeling a little bit burnt out. And I think I also just kind of had this intuition that there were some big changes coming up. And so I guess, I don't know if your sleuthing figured this out, but my wife and I are pregnant. So we have a kid that's due in May.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I know. So I think I'm excited about, being a dad. And I think I was like, I've always had some workaholic tendencies. And I just wanted to kind of create a little more space for family and other things. So I would say I'm definitely working less. I cut my salary 20%. And my goal is not to work, it's not like the 4-10s type model where you work longer days. My goal is to work the same length on the days and just have a 3-day weekend. And basically the goal, I've just been trying to delegate and empower other folks here at Pixel Spoke. So seems to be going great so far.
If I can jump in, are you saying that only you personally are doing 4 days, or you as the entire company is now on 4 days?
Oh, just me. I think the rest if I cut everyone else's salary 20%, I think they'd be unhappy. Yeah, actually, so I work 4 days a week, but they all took a 20% pay cut. It works great, Dave. No,
Excellent.
they're everyone else is still on a normal schedule. We have had various folks on 4-day-a-week schedules in the past, but not right now.
Would you be open to doing 4 10-hour days for your team?
We've had a couple of those schedules. We found alternate work schedules to be a really difficult thing. It's just hard, right? With salaried positions, if I work 4 days a week, but I work 38 hours. So is that the equivalent of someone working 5 days a week, who worked 47 hours or what? It just gets very sticky. And obviously, as you know, work demands aren't evenly spread as well. So my preference is for something more like what I'm doing, where it's just a clean, you work every other Friday off or every Friday off, and you take a 10 or a 20% pay cut. So I would say it's not something we've resolved. We actually have a draft of like a work schedules policy and kind of like application process for alternate work schedules that's been languishing for months. It's really, really hard to do it in a way I think that feels fair and equitable, and transparent, and probably a whole bunch of other adjectives I'm not thinking of. If you guys have the answer, let me know. I'd be happy to.
No, but I have some thoughts on that regarding, I guess, just work schedules, which we're going to get to in a second. I want to jump to something that you talked about earlier, which was social media. So like you have no social media. I was going to try to, move our relationship into a further digital.
The next level.
The next digital step. And I was like, dude, there's other than LinkedIn, like you're nowhere.
You're going to like throw a pig at me on Facebook or poke me or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Like the old beer, like like let's grab beers thing, when Facebook first came out. But yeah, what's up with that?
I killed off Facebook, I want to say in late 2017. And Twitter probably about the same time. My Instagram account was never anything other than just a pathetic shell. I guess the short answer is, we obviously do social media for our company, and like my wife's company at the core is social media. I just reached a point where, it's sort of funny wherever people fall on, how they look at the world today, political spectrum, religious tendencies, income, ethnicity, everyone seems to agree on one thing, which is that the US, probably the world, but the US is getting a lot more polarized. And I felt like social media, by definition lends itself to sort of dualistic headline thinking, all or nothing, black and white type thinking. And I just didn't like it. I had a couple things that I would just see other people post things and people just kind of going crazy. And I think one of my real passions in life is listening, and really being able to see everyone as a unique person. And social media just seems to be the opposite of that, kind of these shaming mobs. There's an amazing book called So You've Been Publicly Shamed by one of my favorite authors about, online social media mobs. And this was even before the bots had really taken over. Now it's like they're not even real people shaming us. But just that kind of mob mentality that I think social media kind of lends itself to. It's done some interesting stuff for sure. I mean, the Arab Spring probably wouldn't have happened without social media. And it certainly is a force for raising a lot of money for causes and getting awareness out. But it feels like fundamentally, it feels like it creates this echo chamber of only hearing from people like ourselves, and then seeing a bunch of content which implies the world is one thing or the other rather than something in between, which to me the reality is it's never one thing or the other. There's always nuances and shades of gray. So that was kind of where I guess just on principle I said I'm out. I also realized there's a bunch of studies to this effect, right? Which is that like it seems like basically no one actually feels better about themselves when they're done with a social media session. Like maybe sometimes, but on average, like the time we spend doing social media just kind of like drains our soul. And I realized that too. Like once I finally like pulled the plug, I haven't missed it at all.
Was it ceremonious? Was it like, hey, everybody come Friday, get your likes and your comments in, and then I'm done with this?
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of a super user, so it was a big deal. Zuckerberg actually emailed me, and they were really sad to see me leave the platform. I think it was a real loss. It's probably why their stock has been a little up and down since then. No,
yeah,
I just went.
They want you back, buddy.
Yeah, it's really hard to have Facebook without me. No, I just pulled the plug. So I think I had gone down to. I think what I realized was I think I had posted 3 times in all of 2017, and I just said, I'm just going to take the next step. It's funny though, right? They got our information. I deactivated, but I did not delete.
Right. It's still there. You could just, you could reactivate. This might be the inspiring move that, you're like, you know what? I'm going back on Facebook. I'm going to friend request that John and even that Dave guy.
I mean, I think that the hundreds of thousands of listeners to this podcast will probably just be, hammering at my account trying to get it reactivated.
I love the optimism in that number you gave.
Tens of thousands.
Wait until you have that baby, and when all your family members are hounding you for pictures, it's so much easier posting it to Facebook.
That's what I got my wife for. She's like I said, social media is her job, so I make no pretense to privacy. I'm like, well,
that's cool.
She'll take care of
that. You mentioned a social media book. You also read 100 books this last year or within a year, correct?
Yeah, and 20. I think I'm up to 113 or something in 2019.
113 in 2019. Okay, so anybody's first question would be, how do you find the time to do that?
I guess I don't have kids. It's probably, and I'm
not on Facebook.
Yeah, that's out.
Yeah, and I'm not on Facebook. I don't know. I just love to read. I mean, I think as my wife is quick to point out, many of them are short books. So there's that. But many of them are, many of them are like
complement each other.
Exactly. I've got some of those 500-600 page books in there too. I've just always loved to read. I think learning has always been my core passion. I remember many years ago, we did a strengths finder test here at Pixel Spoke. And one of the fascinating things was like something like 6 out of the 9 people then had learner as their top, their first or second top strength. So it's a big part of our culture here. And so it's just kind of how I think I keep myself engaged and interested and vital and exploring the world.
What's the best book you read out of that 113?
Just this last year. What is the best book? See, the problem is I read so many, it's hard to even remember, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a fiction book, which is really good. There's one called Snow Falling on Cedars, which is sort of a classic apparently, but it's about Washington State, the San Juan Islands up in the northwestern part of Washington State. Just really, really incredible story. And then I think maybe on the fiction or the nonfiction space, God, there's so many.
Which is the best book? What's your favorite nonfiction book then? Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, 113 is a lot to narrow down with analysis paralysis. Let's go over the 10,000 books you've read, and just let's
go through every single one.
Yeah.
I would say, probably the one that really impacted me the most this year was The New Jim Crow. It's a book that's been out I think it was written in 2013. And it's basically about the way that the criminal justice system works. And it really was like a paradigm shift for me. Like, I think just my concept of how, my concept of how criminal justice works, I think is really different than how it works in the real world. And I think this is another great example of something. If you look at the sort of polemic of Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. And to me, when it's reduced to a sentence, it's just missing the point. America has the largest incarcerated population in the world by country mile. It's not even close. So it's just interesting as a citizen of the United States to say, why do we have so many incarcerated people? And just kind of learning about that. And who knows, maybe some, there's just a lot of depth to it, but I think it's a book that everyone should read just to kind of understand a little more behind some of the heated rhetoric around criminal justice, from all sides.
Okay. Yeah. We'll provide those as links and the show notes. Do you still do the book report? I recall.
I used to do like book reports on the books. This is when I was a young man.
When I first met you, you sent me one. We were like, I recommend this book. And I was like, oh, and you sent me the book report. I was like, damn, I talk about one-upping somebody. You didn't send me the link to the book. You sent me your book report on it. I was like, geez.
Yeah, awesome. I was a motivated young man trying to find my way in the world. I don't do that as much anymore.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Good to know. All right. So obviously you're big on outside of the books you read. I know you're in other programs like EO, the incredible digital mastermind, as you've mentioned. But how much, time do you dedicate to leadership education like that?
I would say, it's sort of a hard question to answer. But if you're talking about more like groups and activities.
Yeah, go there.
Yeah, I would say I probably spend, I do a full day a month with my business coach. And I do a couple days a quarter with this EO forum of 8 other entrepreneurs. And I probably do, let's say, 3 or 4 conferences a year.
Have you always been this way, or was there like a turning point that you sought out leadership education? Because I think there's something that usually happens.
Yeah, I finally had enough money to afford something. I did none of this stuff for the first 4 years of my company. I couldn't afford, a cup of coffee, let alone some kind of fancy program. But I think for me, there's lots of, whatever that quip is, right? That a smart person is someone who learns from their mistakes, and a wise one is someone who learns from other people's mistakes.
So I'm smart.
I just had a few. You're smart and wise. I think I just had a few experiences where I just got my first taste of some of these groups, and we hit some really messy business situation, and the anxiety welled up and the stress welled up. And then it was like, oh my God, I'm just going to email this group. And within a couple hours, I've got 5 responses saying, here's how you handle this difficult employee situation or client situation or whatever. And so instead of me from like first principles trying to figure out, what do you do? I remember one of them was like the first time we had a client. Unfortunately, it's almost never happened. We had a client and I think they were just refusing to pay. And I just like, I don't even like, that's not how I was raised. I don't even know. It just didn't compute. What do I do? And then it was like to hear from 5 people and it was like, oh, like that made it a whole lot easier. And so just the value of that, I mean, hence the term mastermind and the digital mastermind group, that value of a collection of experts or leaders that we can all kind of support each other is just tremendous. It's been such a huge part of I would say, growth in my personal life and life satisfaction, as well as, I would say it's been an immensely rewarding way to meet incredible people like the two of you.
Oh, man, thanks. Yeah, when people don't pay at Dave's company, he sends them over there with an axe and a plan. And
well, that's unfortunately he wasn't in that first group that I emailed, but
So a lot of companies are looking for outsourced and remote employees, for growth. This kind of goes into that scheduling thing that we're talking about. What are your thoughts and how do you leverage each, from, that remote or that, outsourced approach?
So are you talking about contractors or kind of full-time team members?
Let's just stick with the remote. Let's say it's full-time members. Like, what are your thoughts and feelings on that? Is that something that Pixel Spoke, employs?
Yes. So we have 2 remote developers. One is in Nicaragua and one is in Ecuador. I would say it's been a really great addition to the team, and I would say it's been really hard. We had one person initially who didn't work out. We've done a ton of work to integrate them into our culture. I would say it's not fluent anymore, but I used to be fluent in Spanish. And I think that's not insignificant. For example, the guy in Ecuador is Cuban. So when we first met, I was able to speak to him in Spanish about, streets that we had both walked on in Havana. So I just think I think it's a lot harder than people think. And I think if it's something you're going to do, like the people who just kind of look at it as like an arbitrage play of like, how do I, basically keep charging my clients the same and pay, half as much. I think they're missing the point, because I think there's just a whole bunch as far as cultural sensitivities. There's a whole bunch. I will say, just as far as, for our 2 remote employees, they are both the primary breadwinner and they have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. We also had, you may have heard there was a revolution in Nicaragua, and that was one of those things where I was like, oh, I never thought about that when we discussed this, of like literally, right? Like people couldn't drive into town because there were like riots and people were getting shot. So, I think it's one of those things that it's definitely a tool in the toolkit, but if someone's just doing it to arbitrage, I think it's probably not going to work out that well. And we've generally decided we want a mixture of, US and remote developers. That a mixture is really healthy. We wouldn't try to move the whole team offshore. And then just having kind of good back. As you know, we've worked with Iova many times in the past, and you guys are a tremendous partner, and we've got a couple other contractors who are partners. So I just think it's kind of a mixture of all of those things. But maybe the other thing I would say is I've heard this, that the hardest thing to do is have a hybrid remote local culture, which is what we've got. Right. It's a little too late to probably undo that. And we put a lot of work into it, but I think that folks who just think, oh, we're going to have this tight culture of, 10, 20 people in this one city in the US, and then we're going to have 5 people scattered all over the world, between time zone challenges, cultural challenges. Guess what? They have different holidays. They have different, work-life balance expectations. There's a lot that goes into it. And so I think it is pretty hard I've heard it's better just to be all remote or all local versus kind of a hybrid.
No, that makes sense. And then with your remotes, you talked about instilling, culture with them and just making sure that, they're a part of it. But how do you keep current with growth, right? That's something that I've seen with remotes where it's kind of different. I think that's a big play in culture. Are you experiencing any of that?
You mean as far as growing their skill sets? Or
growing as.
So I think this is where we've had, I don't know, the guy who helped us to hire them is a friend, and he always says, this may be what he says to everyone, but that we have kind of the best culture of any of his clients. So part of the reason I think it worked was we had an employee who moved to New York a couple of years ago, actually like 5 years ago. So kind of hilarious because you know, it was the whole like, hey, you got a minute? And I was like, oh God, you're going to. So I went, you know, because she had she had that kind of like worried expression. I was just like, oh, yes. And then she was like, well, you know, so-and-so, my partner got a job in New York. And I'm like, oh, right. I mean, no one, you know, you live in Portland and work with a New York based company. You don't live in New York and work with a Portland based, you know, like that's backwards. Like it's like twice as expensive in New York as it is here. So I'm kind of like, well, congratulations to your partner. And then she was like, well, do you think it would be a possibility to keep working? I was like, what? Like, I just assumed she was quitting. So we took it as a real challenge as a company, and it worked out really well. She had a young kid, so she was able to do a lot of the childcare, and that flexibility was invaluable. Helped us a lot with our East Coast clients. We now had someone who was awake at, you know, ready to start working at 8 a.m. Eastern time. So we had done a lot of work into becoming, we sort of thought it was remote flexible, just video conferencing everywhere like this, tons of setups throughout the office. So I think we had already paved the way with that culture. And then we also put a lot of work into, as I said, kind of our passion for learning as a company. So we do lunch and learns every Tuesday. And we do a bunch of other things too. We do annual things called Journeys of Transformation, which is kind of your personal growth plan, quarterly conversations, which are kind of the next cadence, and then weekly check-ins with your manager. So we do a lot to push people on growth. And I think it has worked out well for us. But I think, and I'm actually not sure it's any different if it is a cultural thing, but I think if you don't set up the environment for learning, most people will tend to just stagnate a little because they don't have the tools and support that they need.
Yeah.
But in any case, I think we have a good program set up, which has made that not an issue for us.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like it. All right. So you've got 40 under 40 when you were only 33. You've been honored by the B Corporation for your tireless work. You know, your agency's got numerous awards, including some Davy Awards. You got gold and silver. The list goes on. So what, in your opinion, is the most meaningful accomplishment that you've had in owning an agency in 17 years?
Most meaningful accomplishment. These are hard questions. And by the way, just anyone who's listening, that the hundreds of thousands listening, John sent me nothing in advance. I have like I have no prep work. I don't even know what we're going to talk about. You know, I think the most meaningful accomplishment is building an agency where we've got, you know, an average tenure that's somewhere between 5 and 6 years. We had someone who just left who was at 11 years. We've got another guy here who's at 12, another person at 9. And I think just the nature of work seems like it's gotten so mercenary, both on the employer and employee side. And so having built a culture where, you know, certainly not everyone, right, but where lots of people really want to stay, that, you know, people say, hey, I feel like I've found a home. I feel like I can authentically be myself. It's pretty cool because you know, going back to that college experience I had, seeing all my friends go get jobs and just be like, work sucks. And one of the things I saw was this phrase again and again where people said, I felt like I had to be a different person at my job. You know, I had to check my core values at the door and pretend and kind of put on a mask. And so that has always been one of kind of my driving goals for the whole time I've had the company. Certainly not perfect, but I think we've at least done it well enough that a lot of folks have found fulfillment and meaning here beyond just the paycheck.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I mean, hell, just staying in business for 17 years is
right.
a hell of an accomplishment, man. Especially, I mean, because most of us started like in the recession, or a lot of us did. I mean, you started pre that, right? And then you had the recession, and you've continued. It sounds like, you know, the sky's the limit. So all right. So you're in Portland, but you're also a soccer player. So are you a Nike guy or an Adidas guy?
Oh, good question. I wear both, but I'm actually no longer a soccer player. This is how dedicated. So I don't know any of the questions, and I'm also doing this interview with broken ribs, which I got.
Wow.
Yeah, right. See how committed I am. I got them a week ago playing soccer. This much larger human being. I'm 5'11", 155 pounds. This guy, let's say, was like, you know, 230 or something. I was going past him, and he just dropped a shoulder and an elbow into me, and I just flipped.
Really?
So I landed and I just was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Wow. All right. I've had broken ribs. My story is vastly different. It involved a very angry ex-girlfriend. But in any case, you're never going to play again? I mean, you've played your whole life, right?
You know, I started playing because I quit playing basketball when I was like 23 because I dislocated my shoulder in a bicycle versus car accident. The car won.
Wow.
Just in case
Good
anyone's
trend
like
here.
there. Yeah, right. And so I had the surgery and all of that, but I just was like, I can't keep playing hoops. Like my arm was hurting too much. I would like wake up in the middle of the night and I was like, I'm like 23. I'm like, good God, I'm way too young for this. So finally I looked around. That's how I found soccer. And I was just thinking like, it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if either of you guys have kids. I don't know anything about this, but I watch my friends with kids. It looks hard. Like you gotta pick this thing up and move them around. And it's like, no, but seriously, I see people that are like, I've got carpal tunnel and I've got tennis elbow and my shoulder hurts. And so I've just been thinking like, maybe it's time to do more like, yoga and like paddle boarding and like, weightlifting, things that don't involve other large humans who might decide to squash me.
Got it. Yeah. You can go one of two ways, right? You can go like, cars and lumberjack, or you can go yoga and, Pilates. So I too have gone the yoga and Pilates route, for what it's worth. I grew up, on the lumberjack side. But yeah, Dave's got a kid. How do you feel, Dave, about doing curls with little baby Emma?
I mean, right now it's the most amazing thing in the world. So there's no concern there. But I too, just based on the age thing, being 40 and just having a baby, I'm looking at the real possibility of being, 55, taking my kid to soccer practice. That's what I'm scared about.
Right. We're going to be old, man. I have a question for both of you guys. I don't know if this is related, but I just can't open this. Does anyone have chest hair in Florida? Like, is this just...
We shave it.
Okay. I just didn't know if it was like a thing because I was like, it's too cold here. Like, so we don't do the open neck shirt thing in Portland, but...
It's requisite. Yeah. Actually, right. if it goes a little bit further down, it looks like a hamster holding on for dear life between my pecs.
So you just kind of get the visible part.
That's all you got. Absolutely.
I mean, it's 66 degrees here today. It's freezing.
Yeah.
Come on, man. It's like 39 here.
There are people with beanies walking around the office. Seriously. Yeah. All right. Okay. So what should the world know about you that I didn't cover, my friend?
Well, what should the world, you already
anything
hit
you want to promote,
media accounts. Oh, anything I want to promote. We touched on B Corp. I don't know, just something to think about. One of the nonprofits I'm involved with here in Portland, very, very loosely, but I just think the world of it is a group called Bravo. And it's based on a program, I think out of Venezuela, called El Sistema, which is basically youth music education to disadvantaged youth. And I just think that's one of the most interesting things that I feel like our society is devalued. I was a musician. That's what I did in Cuba. And I think it's one of the things that it's like society has gotten so focused on, the whole STEM thing. Was it science, technology, engineering, and math?
Are you kidding me? Are you literally going to bring that up? I didn't even know what that meant last weip. And that was our first podcast.
I'm here for you.
You listened to the first episode, obviously.
Wow. I did. No, I didn't. Actually, I didn't even know. I don't know how to find it. I will find it after this. But yeah, like I think there, look, I've got a physics degree. I'm a pretty quantitative guy as well, but I just think we've really devalued a lot of some of the intangible things in life, with some of the focus on technology and measurement. And so just some of the things around, culture and literature and music and art that I think they're a really rich part of the human experience. And maybe just seeing if that's something that maybe it's a plug for myself as well, of just like, how can we all do a little bit more in that space? Because I think that's a lot of what makes us human. That's a random plug, but you put me on the spot. That's what I got.
I know, man. I think that's a fantastic answer. It's authentic, right? If I gave you all this stuff ahead of time, it would have been this, whitewashed, and maybe even greenwashed, a little bit of brown wash, some gray wash in there. It would have been washed, so to speak. But no, I think that's a great answer, and it begs the question: is that also part of your genuine play in going after isn't the best term, working with credit unions because of that community, being part of, it's like everything that you resonate is like all this good, ethical, and, I know you walk the walk. Known you for a couple of years now. I try to stalk you, but obviously you got rid of your social media, but you're like a no bullshit guy and you really believe this mantra. And I think
I really do. Success. I really do. I think, I'll get hopefully not too philosophical, but I didn't mention this earlier. This is another thing. So we're actually converting Pixel Spoke to be a worker-owned cooperative January 1st.
Wow.
So there'll be 5 founding members, and we hope more over time. And it's really different. Dave, this is a little bit, I think, we're 4 months into the pregnancy, but it's sort of like people are like, what's it gonna be like having a kid? I'm like, I don't know. And this worker co-op thing is similar. People are like, how's it going? I'm like, I think it's going good, but I've never done anything like this. And how this connects to credit unions and maybe just cooperatives in general is, I really deeply believe that inequality is one of the biggest problems that our world is facing right now. And I think there's a lot of interesting research about how inequality, it damages civic participation, it damages democratic participation, it encourages polarization. And so I think, and it's funny because people often get heated when you kind of move on from that statement, but it's something that most people agree with, that, that at least everything I've seen, all the studies of what do Americans think a sort of an ideal distribution of wealth is versus a fair distribution of wealth. And I just think there's a lot of factors that have just caused, real wages have been declining since the 70s. And credit unions are one of the models that I think the world needs more than ever of, financial institutions that can make loans that are not driven by profit. Now they're businesses, they have to survive, but I think they play a really important role. And I think people woke up in, the mortgage crisis and, what was it, Wells Fargo inventing 1 million checking accounts. And I know
it's great to have 8.
We've got I think it was US Bank we were with, because we had to do some international transfers for a client, and so our credit union couldn't handle it. And like, I swear, we just get random fees, but they're so random. It's like the perfect algorithm to annoy me and take money from the account, but not annoy me enough to actually shut it down. And like that's what I feel like these mega banks do, is they just sit around and figure out how to extract wealth from the common person. And so I do feel really good about working with credit unions where they instead sit around and say, what can we do to improve our members' well-being, or what can we do to run more efficiently? So yeah, I would say you're spot on that. It is part of where I think I feel, I want to feel like my values and my work are in alignment.
Right on, brother. All right. And how can our audience and anyone that would like to get in touch with you get a hold of you? Obviously not on social
Facebook,
media.
yeah, clearly not on Facebook. Anyone who wants to reach out to me, LinkedIn, as John said, is still easy. I'm also Cameron at pixelspoke.com, so that's pretty easy. I think that's online. Call our main office. You can text John directly any time of day or night, and I'm sure he can connect you as well.
Perfect. All right, brother. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. And look forward to doing this again after the whole employee rollout thing.
All right, will do. Hey, thanks for the invite. And I hope this goes awesome for you guys. I think it's a really great idea. And I love this community you guys have built. There's just so much value there. It's an honor to be a part of it.
All right. Thanks, bro.
All right.
Thank you.